welcome to this session about Start Ready. Where are we now? My name is Leonie Leborgne. I'm the Start Ready manager at Start Network, and I'm joined today by Kazi on my right, so on your left, and Audrey on my left, so your right, who are both part of the Start Ready Governance Committee. Kazi is the chair and Audrey is the co-chair. They have very, very interesting bios, and I would love to share them with you, but we have very limited time. So if you are at the assembly in person, please come and find them over the next 2 days. And if you are online, you can always write to us at startready@startnetwork.org, and we can put you in touch with these wonderful panelists. Today, I would like to give you a quick overview of Start Ready, what it is, where we are now, and what the next 6 months look like. And then I would like Kazi and Audrey to reflect on a positive and a negative each on the process so far, where they think we've had some success and where we think there might be room for improvement. So that's kind of the plan for the half an hour. I know there will be questions coming in. Mark's going to help moderate those. Please know that we will see them all, even if we don't respond to them all today. Okay. So I have a few minutes to tell you about Start Ready. What is Start Ready? So many of you will be familiar with Start Funds, which is a rapid response and anticipation fund, which has been going for a number of years at the Start Network. It's our flagship program, I would say. Start Ready is the newest financing mechanism of the Start Network. And the way we divide them up and the way we see the complementarity between both funding mechanisms is that Start Funds is really well suited to crises that are less predictable and some that are predictable, whereas Start Ready is really focused on modelable crises that happen with a pattern of recurrence, and therefore that we can make predictive models for. So for example, conflict is a little bit more towards the Start Fund side because it doesn't necessarily happen with a cycle of recurrence in the same way as, for example, floods or droughts may happen. And therefore, floods and droughts are more on the Start Ready side. Start Funds is also available to all members right now at all times, whereas Start Ready requires a lot of preparation, a lot of modeling, and a lot of pre-crisis prep, basically. So that's kind of how they differ. I'm going to talk to you about Start Ready today. Next slide, please. Start Ready, the session, if you joined before, it was all about disaster risk financing. And Start Ready is an aggregator or a system that brings together all our disaster risk financing programs. Each of those disaster risk financing programs takes time to build, sometimes up to 18 months. And each of these systems have 3 components. They rely on analyzing the risks and building a predictive model, so a scientific model that predicts a crisis. Pre-agreed plans like contingency plans that say who will do what in which part of the country if and when a crisis is predicted. And finally, money has to be ready. We're not going to start financing or fundraising once a crisis has happened. We have the money ready for that crisis if and when it's predicted. Next slide, please. What is very unique about Start Ready, and this is really the new thing about Start Ready, is that we are pooling together not only funds, which Start Funds already does, but risks. So we are pooling together the probability of different risks happening in different contexts. And what it allows us to do is putting these probabilities together, like you see on the slide, on the left is no pooling, and on the right is with pooling. We're able to stretch the funding further across more risks and ultimately protect more people against modelable crises around the world. So you can see in the top right corner of this graphic, 4 million becomes almost like it's 5 million, 4 plus 1, because of the probabilities when we put them together. Next slide, please. Where are we now? So we are in the first pool of Start Ready, like the first cycle, if you will. This cycle or this pool is currently made up of these 6 countries. The capital is 2.6 million pounds, and we stretch that over these 6 countries and 8 risks to protect almost 300,000 people around the world. we are able to stretch the money 1.6 times further than we would if it was all in separate pots of money that is for traditional humanitarian response. And in this table of the calendars in the slide, you can see at what point the risks may materialize in each of the countries that form Pool 1. Next slide. So far, so it went live, Start Ready's first pool, Pool 1, went live on May 1st, 2022, and it will run for 12 months until May 2023. So far, there have been 4 activations, 1 in Zimbabwe for drought, and 3 in Pakistan for heat waves. And as you know, 2022 was an exceptional year in terms of temperatures, so I don't think this is so surprising. Next slide, please. So this is where we are now. We have gone almost halfway through the first pool. From May to November is the first half, so we are in the first half. We spent the first half of the year getting ready, forming the governance committee that these 2 wonderful people next to me are part of. We went live, so they made the difficult decisions of how to allocate the capital we had across the 6 countries. And if you're interested in that particular aspect about how those decisions were made, you can join our session on Thursday, which will be all about Start Ready decision making. And it's a deep dive, it's an hour and a half. Then from May until now, we've been monitoring in each of the countries where the risks are live. We've published this month a handbook, Start Ready handbook. And we have some risk seasons, of course, coming up, and a midpoint top up in November, which will be the point at which we top up the pool with funds and new risks that are ready to join Start Ready. And then, of course, what is really, really important, because it was the first time we ever did this, in the first few months of 2023, we will look back, look at what we did wrong, and improve for Pool 2. So that's part of the reason we are coming together today, is to have this start those early reflections of what can be done better in Pool 2. So I will end with the last slide that says who governs Start Ready. These are the 9 members of Start Ready's governance committee, 2 of whom are next to me, 2 of which are next to me, but also we are joined at the assembly by quite a number of the others. So if you see their faces around over the next 2 days, or you know them, feel free to reach out to them even by email if you are an online participant. But yeah, so that's where I will stop. I hope I haven't taken too much time. I will ask Kazi and Audrey to have a discussion between you both about the challenges so far, but also the strengths of Start Ready as you see them. Over to you both.
Thank you, Leonie. Great presentation. In a few minutes, you captured the whole ambition, at the same time, the real life situation. Honestly speaking, the Start Ready once again realized, the need for this approach and initiatives, considering resources and to address the vulnerability of people. And the charity form of intervention, reaching people when they are at risk and in crisis, is much better, if we can take action, ahead of time, so that we can make a better future, better intervention in the humanitarian sectors. So to me, we are in struggling to minimize the demand and supply side, but it's true, whatever we're doing is clearly indicating there's the impact and benefits. In whole world, there are several organizations now are in field, and they are trying their best, to minimize the crisis, and the successful and the significant experiences are there who can make this intervention ahead of time. And now with me, Audrey here, and Ray, what do you add with these thoughts in mind? What are the challenges and what you feel about upcoming days?
Thanks, Kazi, and thanks, Leonie, for that wonderful session. As my two colleagues have mentioned, there are challenges and there have been achievements. I think one of the greatest challenges we've faced as Start Ready is achieving the balance between the local needs and the funding that we have at the global level. We've seen situations where there have been requests for funds much more than we have in the pool. As Leonie mentioned, we did receive requests in the first round for about 20 million. And the pool only had 2.5. So working with the teams and the governance committee and the management team to just allocate what we have. So it's a situation of working with what we have currently. And the quants teams does help in knowing who to allocate how much at what point in time. We hope as we move forward and as we receive more funds, we will be able to support more countries. So that's the upside of that kind of challenge, where we are hoping that more teams will come on board and support Start Ready in its initiatives, and we will be able to support more predictable crises at the local level.
Thank you. And with the foundation of Start Fund experiences, the Start Ready, the way we design, you have so Leonie's presentation, you got this glimpse of this process and steps, all building blocks we follow. These are apparently tough, but recent days, help us to realize it's possible. It's possible to make sure the transparency at the same time efficiency, and making sure, minimizing or preventing the crisis as much as possible. So that is a great achievement from our side. And definitely there is always room for improvement to make better. And one is the big challenge to make sure the appropriate data and the impact evaluation, which already started in 2 countries and some others. And what do you think, how best we can make sure the evaluation of impact and connecting this impact for the future planning?
In terms of evaluating impact of the funding to the local systems, we do have a proposition. So some of the hubs are represented within the governance committee, and we have members who can provide that input, but we hope to be receiving reports from the local hubs, from the national hub systems, through the various NGOs that they work with in terms of the impact of the funds provided, what they've been able to do with those funds, and probably a more structured approach in terms of what every hub reports, so that we then feed back to the governance committee that assesses how well the funds have been put to use and the kind of impact that we've had at the local level. Maybe while at that, I could speak to another challenge that we're facing as the Start Ready, and I will link that with what currently happened in Pakistan. As you know, the Start Ready is based on predictable crises, and there's modeling, as Leonie mentioned during the introduction, and what we do. So with the Pakistani flooding that we all witnessed recently, we found ourselves in a situation where we could not release the funds from the global pool because the trigger threshold had not been met. So I guess with that comes the question of how do we balance what we are all seeing happening and the humanitarian suffering we observe on the ground, but at the same time stick to the rules and the guidelines that Start Ready has subscribed to. So we look to take on the lessons based on the analysis that will be performed, just to balance out the situation, and we hope that moving forward we will come up with better nuances and better scenarios that can help deal with such situations. I think I'll invite Kazi to speak on the other kind of challenges that we are facing at the Start Ready.
You just mentioned, I'll continue the threshold or trigger, whatever, the determined issues we fixed up for taking this initiative forward, but doesn't mean we are rigid on this. And recently we're going to launch our guidebook even in assembly. And then we asked our members, to put their experience and expertise ideas, and we'll keep continue, is room for improvement. It's a living document, so that at the end of everything, we need to make sure, minimizing the humanitarian crisis and reaching people in crisis. And at the same time, to avoid, the issues which really we can handle prior to the any incidents. We know there are some known and known things. There are some unknown and unknown things. There are some known unknown things. We need to make sure that, which is supposed to be known, that we make sure we are quite aware, quite ahead of time. That's all. But we'd ask audience and request if you have any questions, please raise. We come up with our views.
Yeah, and just as we move into the Q&A, just as a top up to what Kazi has mentioned, because of the risk we face and the fact that some of our work is based on insurance principles, we do mitigate that risk from a Start Ready perspective further through reinsurance. Being the first cycle, we are still working through the possibility of obtaining insurance, but in the next cycle that should be complete, and that should help mitigate the basis risk, where in any eventuality, if the risks that that materialize and that meet the threshold exceed what we currently have in the pot, reinsurance will help cater by providing funds that could actually be allocated to some of the places where the risk thresholds will be met.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Yeah, I mean, it's a very open and honest, I think, display of the challenges of the first year of Start Ready. So I hope that's what people were expecting. And Mark, I know that there are probably some questions in the Q&A. Do you want to raise some that are particularly good?
So one question from Jamshed in Ready Pakistan. For Pakistan, threshold could not be triggered, but ground the world has observed the actual situation. It is a lesson learned for Start to investigate what actually happened in future learning.
Yes, and I think we did speak to that,
Yes.
And it's been something that has concerned everybody within Start Ready, and it has a lot of the committee, the governance committee members speaking, and we are looking forward to learning. I guess, like we mentioned, being the first year, taking up the lessons and applying those in future cases, because we also what happened in Pakistan will be quite important. And like we've mentioned, there's been ideas bounced off here and there, nothing concrete yet, but once the committee meets, they will evaluate those options and see how then we best take on the lessons from Pakistan. Thank you, Mark.
And even here, Pakistani colleagues are in the assembly, so we'll speak to them. And definitely, as you mentioned, we determined, our way forward, but we don't keep ourselves with rigidity. We are flexible to make sure things happen properly.
Yeah, I think it was a very difficult decision. To those joining who don't know the context, Pakistan floods is one of the risks and one of the countries of the Start Ready's first pool. The thresholds were not met to release funding as per Start Ready and as per what was agreed at national level in terms of the thresholds. However, as everybody knows, the needs were vast, right, and very, very, worrying from all kinds of humanitarian angles. So I think it was a very difficult decision not to override the original settings, if you will, of Start Ready. But it was a decision, I think, that was, taken by not just to be clear, not just these two co-chair and chair of the Start Ready committee, but the 9 members of the Start Ready committee. And I think it will serve as one of the biggest lessons of the first pool, not necessarily showing one side or the other, but showing especially the complexity of the decisions that you as a committee have to make on a regular basis for Start Ready. So yeah, great point from Jamshed, and look forward to continuing that discussion with Pakistani members.
Another question from Matthias from Gold. Can you list those triggers that were not met again, please?
In Pakistan or in general?
I think in the risk pool that we have experienced that not yet triggered.
The upcoming seasonalities. Sure. Mark, do you mind sharing the slide with the calendar and maybe zooming in on the calendar? If this is what you mean, Matthias, and do put in the chat if we're going off tangent. At the moment, we're about halfway through the pool. So we have gone through the drought season in Zimbabwe, the heat wave season in Pakistan, the flooding seasons in Bangladesh and Pakistan. And now we're in the live season of cyclones in the Philippines and floods in DRC. What is upcoming? Maybe Mark, yeah, perfect. What is upcoming is the drought season in Senegal, which the monitoring period ends around end of November. And then we hope to also have some new joiners, as I mentioned before, in November, maybe Madagascar, maybe some others. And then we're seeing the drought season for Pakistan as well in the early new year. So yeah, I hope that answers, but feel free, Kazi and Audrey, if you think maybe he was asking.
So
something.
yes, again, the same triggers that we need to revisit the whole concept and process of triggering the issue. And definitely we take it forward, how best we can make efficient triggering.
Thanks. So another question is again on Pakistan. Was there no activation because the trigger was not met, i.e. the threshold was too high, or because the model was a riverine flood model and the damage was caused mostly by flash flooding?
I can answer that if you guys prefer, and then you
Yes,
can
go
go.
ahead.
I think it's a combination of both, yeah. So we've got the fact that in Pakistan there were very strong flash floods, and therefore, yeah. So first of all, the model was for a different type of flooding. But as you can imagine, flash flooding happens, and then the rivers do fill up. The flash flood water has to go somewhere. And that water does end up in the rivers. So eventually it does push up the level of the river and therefore push up the level of the river to trigger start ready, if that makes sense. Yeah. So the answer is kind of in both parts, yes and no. So yes, the model was for something else, but on top of that, the thresholds of the river itself as it was going up, I think reached about 1 in 7.5 years in terms of severity, and the threshold level was set at 1 in 10. So very difficult situation because obviously it was close to the threshold, even though almost the riverine flooding followed suit. Yeah, Mark, I'll look at the next one.
Thanks. Yeah, we've got quite a few questions, so we might not have time to go through all of them. But the next question from Chris: how is Start Ready helping to promote localization? Are local organizations involved or mostly INGOs?
In Start Ready?
Yeah, so how is Start Ready helping to promote localization, and what is the involvement of local NGOs?
Maybe I'll leave you guys.
Yes, started working both with local and international NGOs, and depends, the presence, the NGOs' presence in those crisis area, and that is, the process and procedure followed by it on the Start Fund experiences, what we last half decade we are dealing with. So that this is the consideration and nothing else, and this is the way we are really taking forward the localization concept. And not necessarily those who are member, beyond that there are some other non-member organizations also are keeping themselves involved with the Start Fund members to address those crises.
Yeah, I think it depends on each country, really. The idea, I think, across Start Network, I believe the targets are to make any governance committee and any decision-making group at least 50-50, 50% local and 50% international members. That's, by the way, it's also reflected in our governance committee, which is 50-50 or maybe even 60-40 towards local NGOs. But anyway, the point being, I think it really depends on the makeup of each country, of the groups of members in each country who apply to be part of Start Ready. I think in the future, we had discussed this in this year, is in the future we might become more stringent or try to incentivize more local involvement at each country level. But yeah, and I think that is in line with the direction that START Network is heading. But I just want to say that it depends on the makeup of each country. And I don't think, I think there is only so much that we as a START Ready or you as a START Ready governance committee can push that. Like there is incentivization and then there's forcing things. And I don't know how much we can. It's a question to you both.
But one thing, the committees or the process of decision making and taking it forward is that different countries have different mechanism, and these are for all good reason. And some are, is for DO course will be in different shape too. But above all, the strength and beauty of the START Ready is this is a platform of different organizations, both local, international, so that we are beyond funding, we are pulling experience and expertise, and at the same time scientific and technical assistance and analysis. This is the true asset of this concept and START Ready, and the way we utilize the same experiences for START Fund.
Yeah, and just to add to what Kazi and Leonie mentioned in the earlier session on the DRF build, they did mention the need for local representation, I believe, to 50%. So it feeds, the sessions feed on each other from the disaster risk financing model, which then through the national hubs become members of the START Ready, and those are the people we work with. So it's a collective effort, but local representation is required in the DRF systems.
Same in Bangladesh is an example, more than 50% members are local organizations.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the leadership role also at this moment, the local organization are in lead role. So that, but the involvement of international organization helping us to bring international expertise and experiences. That these organizations are connected with many other local organizations for any projects or any intervention. We connect those local organizations for information and to keep ourselves updated about the situation and the protection. And in addition, for one, many of you are aware, contributing for technical assistance and clarification. So I would appeal and recommend for friends, those who are with us today, please visit the site, START Network site, so that you will find many more information and the way we work in, that would help you to learn and to share with your views.
Great. Just 1 minute left, so we might not be able to get through more. There's a lot of interesting questions. But this one from Suleiman from the Afghanistan hub, who's asking about his own hub, but I think it's a wider question about accessing START Ready. He says, my question is that we are in the very initial stages of hub formation. So would it be more appropriate in terms of applying for START Fund or START Ready once the hub is formed?
It's a good question. I think it kind of depends on the crises that they are looking at in Afghanistan and what funding is needed. So like in all countries, usually what the beginning step of a disaster risk financing strategy is to look at what funding exists, what risks the country and the members face, and what is the type of funding that is missing the most. So that's the first step. And I would say, just so that it's not biased for START Ready straight away, yeah, maybe that is a more important step first, and then seeing whether START Fund or START Ready best fills the gap that is faced in Afghanistan. But that's me trying to be very unbiased. So I hope you guys
Good
agree.
step, yeah, agreed.
Great, maybe we wrap up there then. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but as I said, get in touch or come to the sessions if you're here in person. We'd love to discuss more. Kazi and Audrey, we're very lucky to have you. You're so engaged, you're so into it, and I'm so thankful. So thank you for joining.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining. Bye.
Goodbye. All right.